Excited that there's so much content available. I remember back in the day, I'm going to date myself a little bit. We had a book with documentation, and then like you had to read through it. And if you couldn't figure it out, you had to like pick up an actual landline and call support. So excited that we don't have to do that, that information is readily available to us. Annoyed about information readily available to us also because the quality of that information is oftentimes questionable. So I'm kind of excited and annoyed about the same thing.
So I think, is everybody an expert now because they have the internet at their fingertips?
Yes. And I'm sad to say that I pulled it off on my doctor too. I said I have to do some research about something, and he was very annoyed. But knowledge is power.
So I mean, we catch ourselves doing that
Absolutely.
in so many different spaces over that. But I think one of the things that I'd love to kind of go in and this is what we want to call the BS on things is how are you identifying the things that you should be calling BS on, right? Or like what are the techniques and actually what are actual examples that you've been reading? Like, I can't believe somebody wrote that because that is wrong, and whoever's following this is believing this is the right thing to do. That is wrong.
I think everybody feels like they're an expert now, right? Like, oh, I can Google it, I can look it up, and I'm an expert. The reality is, well, I am naturally very skeptical. So for me to trust something, I have to understand it. Not truly, fully, completely know, but understand it enough where it starts making sense in my head. So anything new that comes at me, if I read something, I'm very, very skeptical. So I keep researching on that specific topic. And what I've seen very recently is, I absolutely hate, and I hope I don't offend you, the influencer. Oh, you're an influencer. I'm not, right? Like everybody's an influencer now because they can put, two paragraphs together that are easy to read. No, you're not. Like, I was reading an article recently that was just blatantly wrong, and it was suggesting something that was very dangerous. Luckily, what it was suggesting wasn't possible. So somebody who wrote it didn't actually test it. So they were saying, do this, you can't actually do it. And then the fact that they were suggesting to do it was, I was quite shocked. But this is what happens. People just, write. And it was on kind of like a trustworthy website too. Nobody's validating, like research, right? Like you have PhD, like somebody's reading, rereading, editing, commenting, ripping you to shreds before you publish something. It doesn't happen in the world of the internet.
This is tough, right? Because you see people, if they have lots of followers, right, or they get lots of comments, they're posting things that seem very insightful. You want to believe it, right? You want to trust it. And, we live in a time right now where trust is really hard.
Or you see somebody else you trust liking something or commenting, then that must be true, right? So I think this is
the social validation.
Exactly. Social validation is.
So social media, exactly. That's exactly it. And I kind of like, I go back and forth, right? Like I want to encourage for newcomers to share their thoughts, right? Because that's how I learn. I talk about it and you say, but wait, have you thought about this? And I'm like, oh, no, I haven't, because I don't know everything. As a matter of fact, the more I learn, the less I know. But I really want to learn everything. I want to know about everything. So I want to encourage people to be comfortable speaking and writing. But at the same time, how do we help others understand that this isn't necessarily correct? And I think my best thing is just always be skeptical.
So
researching.
I would love to, let's dive into some things that may be touchy. So what are the data topics that you're seeing that is people are talking about in angle A and they're completely ignoring angle B, or a lot of what are the things that are on top of mind right now?
So I would say three things. Whenever a platform says that it'll solve all your problems, just buy a tool, it'll solve all your problems. And it's not there's anything wrong with the tool. And I'll give you an example. You buy a car, you give it to your 10-year-old. Do you think a 10-year-old can drive a car? No. So you can't say, oh, 10-year-old can get around by just giving them a car. No, they're not ready for it. So tools kind of like that. No, you have to know how to use it. Obviously, data modeling. I talk about data modeling a ton just, I've gone through data model instead. Who needs data modeling? Just dump everything. I don't want it. It's hard. I don't understand it. Oh, now, forgive me, I'm going to pick on DBT for a second. DBT model is a data model. No, it's not. So just like using that. Oh, and there's also data modeling in machine learning, right? Data
Yeah.
science. So that's another area that's just gone like crazy back and forth circles up and down. And then the third area is AI. Mythical, magical, ooh, is going to solve all the problems. This is like, it's like the cloud, right? We're going to go to the cloud. Well, like, well, the cloud is a computer somewhere. Like, there's nothing magical about it. But I think to a lot of people, AI is this next mythical, magical thing that'll solve all the problems, when the reality is whatever you put into it, that's what you get out of it.
And one of the things that could go connecting to the influencers is are the influencers more kind of on the tool sides that you're seeing the people, or is it on particular AI data modeling? Or because, and I bring this up because we want people to really, again, how can we make them be skeptical? Not make them, but how can we like incentivize people to be skeptical? It's like, you're seeing this thing, connect the dots. Like, that person is probably working here or does work at this. There's an incentive of why that person is actually pushing that message, and I think that's important to understand.
That's interesting. That's the psychology part of it. What is driving somebody to be out there? A lot of people just they feel it's their way to move, right? To get more gigs, to get a new job. To others, they're simply trying to share their experience.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
No, there's nothing.
That's important. I want to go say, like,
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with that. It's just like, understand their motivations, because people have biases.
Oh, 100%.
And
That's okay. Like, I'm a fan of Snowflake, and I'm a fan of Data Vault. I'll be talking about it, but I'm not in it to sell. I'm here to educate and also learn, right? I'm like, oh, Snowflake is amazing, blah. Somebody comes back and says, well, you know what? Oracle has actually been doing this same thing that Snowflake just came up with for the past 20 years. I love those conversations, right? Like, it kind of like opens my eyes to other things. So, but to answer your question, I've seen it everywhere. People love tools, people love patterns, people push their ways of doing stuff. Gonna go again into psychology. I think people inherently are very competitive and love to be right and win. So I see a lot of these discussions are kind of fights, and it's not necessarily like, it's not even fundamentally to just collectively be better, but to win. And I always find it very fascinating. And when I say, like, I'm not here to change your opinion. That's okay. And by the way, there are more than one way to do stuff. And I'm totally fine. Don't change your opinion. That's okay. I'm just sharing my experience. And people get shocked.
I think that's a big challenge that we have these days, is that there's always such a competitiveness to, especially conversations about like a right way to do things, right? And as we all know, being in the data space, right, there's some religions, there are some factions, right? And how do we deal with that, right? Do we all need to learn to be better citizens? That, on one hand, we all have to be a little more humble and willing to hear other people's opinions, and on the other hand, be willing to call out somebody and not say, hey, I see you saying this, but what about this situation? I don't see how that applies. Is it kind of both of these things?
You great comments. So be humble and always learn. Sometimes, and I've seen happen to me many times, I might be sure that I know, and I'll make a comment, but the reality is maybe this was true 5 years ago. It's no longer true. Things change. So learn, be humble, always ask questions. I think oftentimes somebody comes in, I'm an expert, but the reality, like, maybe they are in their specific little area. The world is complex. There's a lot of different things. The other side, I often see people who are in consulting, their view of the world is different from people who actually work full time on teams day in and out. It's a completely different ball game. It's different how you approach things. You're there for long haul.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I'm going to call out myself here. It's like, I work for a vendor, and I have experience. I have past experience, previous company and stuff. But like right now, the last 4 years, I've been at a vendor. My experience is from a vendor perspective, implementing which is different from somebody who's actually on the
Right.
buyer side implementing thing, which is different from the consulting side. Doesn't mean that and I catch myself as like, oh, I kind of pushing, this is how we should go do this, and a lot of it is I postulate about things and I'm seeing things, but this is from my perspective,
Right.
which people should take that from with a grain of salt. Obviously, I have a bias because I work for a vendor, but I think this is also, again, goes back to like understanding who are the people who's actually talking. What are their backgrounds? Where do they work for? What experience do they have?
Where are you coming from, right? Like, you're like, as a vendor, right? You come in, we bought a tool, so money's there. I'm sitting, I don't have a budget, right? That's a different perspective, different ways I'll have to solve the same problem. Then, like, there's all these different sides. And then the other thing that I often see, somebody worked for one company and they successfully implemented something and they come out and say, this is the way to do it. I've worked for very different companies. I worked for software companies, financial, right now I work for retail, e-commerce, different cultures, different people's skill sets, completely different approaches and implementations. You can't just come on and say, well, I worked for company APC, we successfully did this, and this is how everybody should be doing it. It's not how it works. Again, world is very complex. We're all different.
The one of the, on this, I think talking about experiences, something we were chatting before was what do we mean by experience, right? So their experiences, I work for consulting. I've helped other people, let them go do it, but I haven't really rolled up my sleeves.
Right.
Or I have rolled up my sleeves in the same place for 10 plus years, or I've rolled up my sleeves in 5 places for 2 years each, right? So I mean, I think this is one of the things that we've talked about of understand what experience means.
Right. And again, it's like completely different. You helped 50 different customers implement something. I've been on the side where I had to support what you've implemented. Completely different experiences, right? And as far as like years of experience, somebody doing the same thing for a very long time, say for 15 years, is it the same as somebody also working for 15 years in different company, different team sizes, different maturity of these companies, different experiences? Again, like, know where the person's coming from and be skeptical, but also be humble. Like, even though and I kind of try to, like, as I'm in my teams, to get that like psychological safety with the team, where I absolutely want to hear what everybody has to say. Even, it doesn't matter that you're inexperienced. Sometimes somebody will ask a question, then it will lead somebody else to think of something great. So you might be like, I'll give you an example, which is kind of like anti-pattern, but sometimes I learn from my own mistakes. My very first migration to the cloud. So I was a database administrator, and I was specializing in performance tuning. I could tune that SQL Server to, like, it was purring. So when they're like, oh, we're moving to the cloud because data center, I'm like, no, I can tune that server. It's just fine. I did not want to go to the cloud. Like, job security, I was worried.
It's cool to go. I love going into an explain plan and seeing this, and like, right. It's a fun thing. You're like, oh, they're taking this away from me.
Yeah, and I was like, and I'm like, why? It works just fine. Like, I am comfortable. I can make it. And now, mind you, there's only like, how many people do you know who can like really fine tune something? Not many. So it was like, was that
like, becoming a lost art?
Should I be doing this? Well, that's beside the point. So we're like, okay, leadership comes in, moving to the cloud, AWS team came in, this is what you're doing. We're like, no. We're like, okay, let's test it out. So we spent quite a few months, tested things out in and out. Like, we actually wanted to show that this doesn't work. So the way we went in was like, no, let's show that we don't need to do it. But what came out is like, what AWS suggests is not how we want to do it. We want to do it in a different way, and it's incredible. It's the options of the cloud. And we went to much faster servers, cheaper, high availability. We set things up in an incredible way. And I was like, wow, I want to learn. I want to know more. So my mentality going in was like, let's make this fail. But I came out of it, I'm like, I want nothing to do with data centers anymore. Please take me to the cloud. So to me, that was learning.
That's interesting to hear that story where you were trying to honestly prove a different point, and even the vendor was recommending a certain approach. But then when you went in with an open mind, learning, asking questions, coming up with ideas, you were able to actually figure out a better idea, a better approach that was tuned to what your specific use case was.
Exactly, precisely. And it's like, be humble and be learning. Always be learning. I think we all know that in data, like how things are changing. It's a place where if you stop learning, then you'll be left behind.
Mm-hmm. I think another experience thing that we hear a lot about, right, is, well, what if you came from Facebook, or you came from Netflix, or you came from LinkedIn, or you came from, right? And it's like, oh, we did Kafka at massive web scale or whatever, right? So I know how streaming works. I know how databases work, right? What do you think about that kind of experience and how it applies when it applies?
I'll please don't judge my Instagram feed. I I had a video. Cardi B was on Jimmy Kimmel, and she was saying how she got a Lamborghini truck, and he's like, "But you don't drive." She's like, "That's okay. I take pictures with it." Kafka streaming, what Facebook does, what Netflix does, is that Lamborghini truck that we're trying to bring to our garages to take pictures with them.
This is the best, one of the best analogies I've heard. We need to put this on a T-shirt. Kafka is like the Lamborghini truck that you
That
put
you
in your
can't-
garage,
yeah.
so you can't drive, but you take pictures
But
with.
but that's exactly it. Do you really need this massive, expensive, powerful thing for the problem that you don't have, or the tool that you don't know how to use? And I think that's we've had this, but because these companies that we look up to, we want to copy them.
Okay, I'm going to take a quick turn here. Kafka streaming, is this something people really need to start paying attention to, or is this just too much of?
Okay, so I think it's we often joke in my team is like when you give a mouse a cookie. So I think micro batching is just fine for majority of the companies, but as people get more educated in data, how to use data, the thirst to get kind of quicker data is there. So I think streaming is coming, and people are interested in this, like practically real-time analytics. So I do see a place. I don't think everybody needs to do it still, and we have some time to go before it happens. But I am seeing this like, oh, well, I don't want data every hour. Give it to me more often, like give it to me more frequently. I want to be able to make decisions. I want to embed this into applications, right? I want that decision making kind of like quicker.
Okay, this
But
is a perfect laugh parenthesis. I appreciate this. We're gonna put that on the T-shirt. We have so many T-shirts that we're gonna go do. We're really gonna do this one day. But so you bringing up the Facebook and bringing up the experience, and I think I want the audience to take have some clear takeaways of identifying the motivations or the biases people come from. So I think one of experience is like, oh, I come from a big tech, right? So like you're saying all these things, but you realize that their background is big tech. Well, you know where they're coming from. Then there is one where people have been working at a place for 10, 15 years, right? They have that experience. They have other experience where they've been working, they have a lot of diversity in smaller amount of time. What other ones would you add there, and how would you characterize, and how do you manage all this?
Oh, I honestly want to have like one of each on my team. Just to bring these different perspectives. Somebody who's been with the same company, same team, know what it takes to build something that's easy to maintain. Right? They've been there. They know things break, and they know hopefully they aren't just like, I don't care, but they know how to fix it, that it doesn't break anymore. And I think people who come out of these like, oh, I've been here for a year, there for a year, don't have that. So I see it a lot. People build. Like as engineers, we love to build. We don't think about like operational and support. Like, is this actually gonna live, and how easy it is to support? People that have these different experiences, different companies, bring just they see a lot of things, right? Like, how does this team, this specific business solve this problem? People who come out of big companies, to me, honestly, I think because there's so many people and a lot of problems have already been solved, they bring kind of like, I don't know how to phrase it. Would you go? I'm gonna go with the car analogy again. Would you go from racing, say, I don't know, a Ferrari to driving a tricycle? Only like you don't know how to step back. Like they've had, Facebook, Netflix, they have hard problems to solve. They've been around for a while. They solved it. The engineers who truly built it from scratch, like
Are not there anymore.
are not there anymore. So people who use the tools, and that's cool. They hopefully know what a good tool looks like, but they don't actually have experience growing something from the ground up. So it's kind of like, it depends. I'll
So
give
it's
you an
interesting. So
example.
the big tech experience are folks who know how to use the big tools.
Yeah.
But are they like the 1%?
Probably. And I mean, it's a great for resume, but I'm not, honestly, I'm not impressed. Sorry for my, I've worked with some,
This is the Honest No BS
yeah.
podcast. So this is
I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but I will. I've worked with some brilliant people from like smaller companies, self-employed, and I've seen some not particularly exciting people from big tech. Again, my experience, my biased little side of the world experience.
Yeah. I think that's an honest conversation, right? That like, I mean, flip it on its head on like education, right? Like, okay, you went to Harvard or something like that. Like, does that mean that you're instantly going to be the right fit for my organization, for my use case? That it may not be so, right? So there are other factors.
100%, yeah. Um, don't get impressed with big college names. I am appreciative of somebody with education. 100%. You put the work in, and you hear stories. People like PhDs are. I'm like, you are just, there's dedication right there. PhD is not. I mean, it's like you could be practical and be like, I'm done with my master's. I'm going to go work and make money, or you can be actually determined to accomplish something. So it's to me like, I couldn't do it. I was too lazy. I kind of like, I'm getting a master's degree, I'm done. But so I really appreciate it. And also I love when people come with, my undergrad is in biology, right?
Mm.
I was planning to become a doctor. Didn't happen. People who come with different kind of like undergrads turning into something different and going with it, right? And then continuously learning to learn more about the area that they're in. Also love that, and love kind of like different perspective.
So let's dig a little bit more into. So we talked about experience. Let's talk a little bit more about education. We're starting to go in that direction a little bit. What is the kind of education profile that you look for, right? Like, do you value computer science? Do you value what do you think about boot camps, for example, data boot camps and that sort of thing?
So to me, and like maybe because that's a bachelor's degree is a must,
Mhm.
I don't particularly care in what.
Mhm.
I think learning in college and broadening your horizon with different classes makes you just a better person in general. Um, you can take a boot camp on top of that. When I entered, the workforce in tech, like if you want a program, we'll take you because there was not enough people. Now it's competition. So there's a lot of, strong programs across just about every college. So I think without a degree now it's a lot harder. Sure, I know maybe two people who succeeded without a degree out of thousands of people that I know. So it's kind of like to give you perspective. Yes, you can succeed without a degree, but it's very, very hard.
Sorry, this is an honest take here, and this is let's like acknowledge that it is in a way today a little bit more elitist, but because not everybody probably can go get a 4-year education.
Oh my!
But
Let's talk about that.
Well, yeah, I mean,
everybody can go get it for your education, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
So kind of, I don't usually talk about it. So I immigrated to this country when I was 17. We came immigrants with just a bag of clothes each. I have a bachelor's degree. I have a master's degree. They're state colleges. I took out loans. I invested in myself. I worked. I went to college. I we'll talk about languages a little bit. Um, I still have PTSD from taking animal biology, because not only did I have to learn names in English, I also then had to learn them in Latin. So I was like, if I translate from Latin to English, I still had no idea what that was. And then I had to translate it into Russian. That's where I'm from. So I had a hard time. It was like double learning, like learning two languages at the same time. But everybody can absolutely do it. I think you just have to persevere.
Well, this is an interesting topic here. This is actually fascinating that we're talking about education. This is the data podcast, but this is something we don't talk about, which I'm really
Mhm.
cool that we're glad that we're talking about it. Um, when it comes to education, I think a lot of people are actually saying that, why do I want to invest 4 years and get loans and all that stuff? Because I could just go take a boot camp and then I get enough skills that will then make get a job
Right.
where I could make enough money where it's the same thing as I would have gotten a 4 year degree. Well, I mean, you are a person with so much experience that you lead data teams, you hire people. Like, what is your honest, no BS kind of
I will. I mean,
assessment here?
I'll be completely honest with you. I mean, I do believe to helping people reskill, but when I have 200 resumes in front of me, your boot camp is not going to stand out against a bachelor's degree. I'm just like, when I have multiple people, I will try. I truly respect professionals, right? Somebody who spent X number of years doing something and now they're trying to reskill. Uh, I will try to help you, but again, it's competition at this point. And for me personally, as you can clearly see, education is very important. I think it makes us all just better humans.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you, but I will acknowledge again my bias that I come from a very elite. I have a bachelor's, I have a PhD, my family has a PhD, my
That must
wife's a
have been like
PhD.
so cool growing
So
up.
yeah, I acknowledge that this is where I come from, that bias, but I do see a lot of the people are hungry to go learn but my impression is that a next generation in a way wants it a little bit easier,
It's
faster,
an easy, yeah,
and you have to acknowledge
satisfaction. Yeah,
it's not that easy. It wasn't
it's
easy
not.
for you, but
No.
and if it were easy, everybody would be doing it, right? And I think everybody are trying to go do that, but at the end of the day, competition will show you is like, well, there's people who actually have put more effort
Mhm.
into it and they're going to stand out more.
100%. And also like, uh don't like, oh, it's expensive loans. There's state schools. You can go to community college. As a matter of fact, I will pick your resume if you show like you went to your community college, you transferred to a state school, you have a degree. To me, it means you actually did the work because you couldn't afford to go to an Ivy League school. You actually like you worked hard to get where you are, and this is showing a lot about you. Like to me, like this resume will stand out versus like, oh, I took 2 week class. Like boot camps are great for like just adding more things. Like I am too lazy to go back to college right now. Like I want to, but I know that I won't. So to me, that next level up upskilling, I take maybe a certificate somewhere, or maybe I take some courses somewhere. But yeah, I hear that a lot. It's like, oh, who needs education? It's just loans. I'm old fashioned that way.
I Yeah, I thought this episode is going to be like a bunch of with all due respect here, a bunch of like old grumpy people, and that's maybe how we're sounding. I wonder what people think about
I
that.
don't know.
I don't
Well,
know what
listen, I have
how are
Cardi
you?
B. I'm hip. I have
Oh, how
Cardi B
about
on
you?
my Instagram.
What camp are you in, Tim?
I'm in the camp of be humble, be learning, and I resonate with a lot of what you're saying, Veronica. And I think that one of the questions that I have, is what's the advice that we should be giving to the new generation, right? Like imagine that I'm an analytics engineer, right? And I've got 2 years of experience and I've worked at one startup or something like that, right? And I don't know what I don't know, but I know that I love data and I want to be in the world of data. What should I be doing now? Like what next for me, right?
Yeah. So how I learned when I first started, I log into forums where people ask questions, and it could be anything. Pick your own. And I read questions and I read all the answers. So you will easily be able to sort through like who's attacking whom and which. Don't just read the one that's like marked as an answer. Read everything. I learned a ton that way. As a matter of fact, again, be skeptical. I am just naturally skeptical. When you read reviews, say on Amazon, do you read 5 stars or 1 star?
That's a great question. I read both. I like to go see everybody who's raving about it, but I'm like, wait, there's people who said one star. Like, I'm curious what they had to go say.
Yeah.
I actually read 2, 3, 4.
Oh,
So I think 5 and 1 are outliers. Somebody's really very, very pissed about something and it's very biased, or like somebody when you read people that are like, okay, I dig this, but I have a problem. And then I'm like, okay, does this problem bother me? And I'll give you an example in shoes. I love shoes. So slight obsession, you probably see. If I read, they're like, oh, well, I had to spend a month to break them in, but they're amazing now. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, so they look nice. Do I have enough patience to have blisters for a little bit? But then I have these awesome shoes. And sometimes I'm like, nah, I'm too old. Like I just need comfort right now at this point. Or I'll be like, okay, cool. Because otherwise you'll be like, I love these shoes, or like, I hate them, they're uncomfortable, right? Like, remove the outliers, read everything else, and then decide kind of like what's important. And you also see patterns, because there are very similar questions being asked and very similar patterns being answered. So that's how I learned. I love user groups. Huge fan of user groups. I think.
Can you call out some of the ones that you like to recommend?
Well, again, I'm into Snowflake, so I love Snowflake user groups. I think some of them get pretty detailed. And if, by the way, if you ever want to know anything about Data Vault, let me know. There's a few user groups. What else? Which other user groups?
There's so many Slack communities out there.
There's Slack communities. I think
there's a lot of noise and stuff.
There's a lot of noise.
Let's keep on the positive side.
Yeah.
Which are the ones that you recommend?
Okay,
to join?
So here's the deal. I am part of all of them, and I read them anyway. I don't necessarily participate. I became a lurker. I love to read. I was actually listening to a podcast on the way here. So when I have like a free moment, I stop working, make dinner, we eat, and then I transition into family room, and then I either read something or I write something. It doesn't stop. I mean, I'm like a learning junkie. So be part of communities, read them, take them with a grain of salt. I think these communities are very biased, kind of like my Instagram feed. So they're cliques of people, but I think it's still very interesting. Like, it's still very interesting what people are talking about.
So even if you see the clicks and they're like, oh, you learn from those, like, oh, here's the same people talk about the same thing. And then that should generate some curiosity. Like, why is that?
Learn more about it, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how like modern data stack happened to me. I joined Locally Optimistic.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, okay, let's now sort through the noise and figure out what is actually important to me that helps me solve the problem for my current company, right? Like, this is the problems we're facing. How can I take some of that knowledge and not be like a fangirl of some craziness, so I can actually sort through it? Yeah.
No, that's interesting, and I think one of my observations here is that you can join a lot of these communities, you can absorb kind of what's happening there. But that also doesn't necessarily mean you have to feed directly into the religion, right? Like for example, I know I'm part of the Data Mesh learning group, right? And you learn a ton there, right? And there's a ton of excitement around data mesh, but you don't necessarily have to prescribe to everything. You can absorb it. You can see what people are talking about and agree with the things you agree with, and you can disagree with the things you don't agree with, or just lurk, right?
And we talked about learning from the past, right? Like, I've been kind of like, so like these Slack groups are old new. They're like, nothing old exists. You're old. You're outdated. I grew up with the old, and I'm like, but learn from the history. It's like when you take parts that make sense, that still work, and put it together, right? That's when magic happens. It's not one or the other. Like, you really have to mesh together. And the younger, kind of like hip crowd, they're like, oh, you're old, right? Like, Bill Inman still saying the same thing he's been saying for the past 40 years, but it's true.
Bill is.
I want to be Bill when I grow up. I'm just gonna come out right here on this podcast and say that I want to be Bill when I grow up.
I think everybody wants to be Bill when he grows up. When we grow up, this is, he is our hero.
He's Just
I,
yeah.
I think in going to the history, one of the things I always I caution. I'm like, look, just because it's old doesn't mean that's bad. I mean, we have to think about the principles, the foundations of things, and the names change, right? But the foundations, the principles
Don't
behind it are
change.
the same. Sometimes they do change because we learn something. I mean, this happens in physics, it happens in all the other science, but if we look at computing, we're just 50 years old as an area here. Like this stuff is like super new, and if go compare accounting, go compare
Mhm.
and all the different areas of engineering. Like this thing's been for
Yeah.
thousands and thousands of years. Things have changed here. Like we can't expect that what is new, we're doing today is the latest, greatest, most amazing thing. Because guess what you're doing today was probably, it's like we've already been thinking about it, talking about it for decades
Done,
and
tried,
decades.
failed, and
Yeah,
on the shoulders of giants, right?
this is exactly
Right,
build. We build on the shoulders of giants, and let's not diminish those giants behind us.
and push forward. Like, don't reinvent the wheel. It's not fun. It just why waste of time.
People like to reinvent things because it's
Well,
like,
they
oh,
think theirs is better. Yeah,
yeah, but
yeah.
And you add new terms to it, right? Like the data umbrella or the data
Well,
skyscraper.
in data ocean, right? I was going with the Nemo theme, just so you know, in my LinkedIn post.
as I call it, it's not the mean data streets as
Yeah,
Chris
yeah,
Tab.
Chris. Yeah.
It's an ocean now over there, right?
I started laughing randomly. My husband looked at me and was like, "What's wrong with you?" I'm like, "I'm going with the Nemo thing." He's like, "Okay."
So
What do you-
there's so much more to talk about here. But one thing that we haven't actually touched, just to wrap up before we go to our lightning round, we talked about the young generation. We haven't actually defined what young generation means. How what are we defining as a young generation? I want to consider myself young.
I think people who have never touched anything that's not modern data stack. I think that's how I define it.
So
Past 10 years, less than 10 years experience, less than 10 years in the
I
business.
would. When can we state that the modern data stack as a term became that term?
I kind of like, or maybe I'm
4
actually
years
drawn,
ago.
or maybe data, like maybe that's what I'm thinking, like 2010 when data lake was, I don't know. I don't know.
I don't know, Tim. What do you what
What do you think?
This is tough. I want to say like maybe even 10 years of experience is too big. It's like you've really come into your own in the data world like in the last 5 to 6 years, I would say, right? Because like data lake, Databricks, that became very big in like 2018 kind of time frame, right? So it's kind of like from there forward feels like this is like the modern data era, right?
let's do a little bit of history here. So let's go. So I like to always go back to the beginning of the web, right? So Tim Berners-Lee comes up with the
I
web.
wasn't born back then.
No, the
So-
web, not the internet, the web. So Tim Berners-Lee comes up with the web in 1989, right? And the web just booms around 90, 91, right? With Mosaic, right? Netscape, all this stuff. And my argument, kind of the way I interpret history here is that the way the web grows is because of e-commerce, right? Right? You have things like eBay and right, Amazon is trying to go selling things,
Mhm.
right? So before that, you already had database management systems, right? There are OLTP,
Mhm.
and then the web is a driver to say, oh, we need to start analyzing all these things that people are buying. So that's a big kind of push for OLAP and getting into data, pushing more data warehouses. Data warehouses has been doing before, but that was a big push for that. So I think there's an era like, if we've been working with data warehouses like in the mid 90s and stuff. Then I would argue in the mid 2000s, the web gets even bigger and bigger, and Google pushes their whole. We have so much data, and they do big table, and then map reduce, and then we have so much data that we have to go that we can't have schemas, and we go to NoSQL, and the first one is Amazon doing it with DynamoDB. So then you have another era of people who are growing up in the NoSQL, in the beginning of NoSQL. So I think this is like 2009. I would say, right? And the Hadoop,
data lake, right?
right?
Like
And then the Hadoop era,
Mm-hmm.
MapReduce era is around again. It's right, like
Mhm.
it's. I think the Google paper and the Dynamo paper is around 2007. I think. So then you have that other era. Like when does Cloudera come around? I think it's that time. So that's another era. And then
That's almost like another phase of this, right? Because
Yeah.
yeah,
there's the
yeah.
data
So I'm just
warehouse
trying to go with
phase.
the new generation because if you grew up,
Mhm.
basically, if you use Cloudera, worked at Cloudera, like stuff like you're not new
No, I think
generation
you're old
anymore.
timer
Yeah,
at
you're
that
an old
point.
timer at that point,
Yeah, at
right?
that point
But
you're old.
that's
Last
13 years
decade.
ago,
Yeah.
right? So then,
You're right.
so then
I
we
think
go.
in the past maybe 5, 6
Yeah.
years.
So then we
Yeah.
start like I remember being at the Sigmod conference, the database conference, the academic data conference in San Francisco. I think that was 2015, and Snowflake was presenting an academic paper in the industry track at Snowflake, and I was there. I remember being at that presentation. I'm like, what is this thing? Another thing, and then separating cloud and compute, and I'm like, so this was, I think this was 2015, and Snowflake wasn't a thing yet. So and then Databricks hadn't come out yet, right?
Right.
So anyways, I'm just trying to come up to the
Yeah,
point. Like
you
the
want like
Snowflake is definitely
can
after
we do like
2015.
ish?
So 2018.
Let's do
2018,
17, 18. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyways,
Let's roll with it.
so if you are in data after 2017, 2018, then you're the new generation.
Can we also say if you haven't touched like an old timer like Cloudera, Hadoop, Oracle, SQL Server, then you're also younger generation.
Oh, have you actually installed a SQL server on your laptop or
Yeah, like
so,
have you actually touched like a real database? Have you worked with a real database? I'm just kidding. I probably just offended like both sides of the new and the old generation.
what is a real database?
What is a real?
It's funny how there's a whole generation of people who don't really know some of these more traditional technologies. I mean, a lot of them are still alive and well, right? I mean, like Microsoft,
yeah.
think like SSIS, SSAS, SSRS, right? And then
Oh,
sometimes
man.
people hear that and they say, "What did you just say?"
How many access databases have you been working on?
Yeah, how many access database does it take to?
Okay, we can keep going, and actually, we're gonna keep going after this because we're here in Boston at an Honest No BS dinner that we're setting up. Next week, we're gonna be in Atlanta. If you're listening, I know we already had some listeners who reached out who are gonna come to our dinner next week or in 2 weeks in Atlanta. But all right, lightning round presented by Data.World. Let's go. I go first. Here we go. We just came up with these questions.
All right. Well,
All right. So here we go first. A person with 10 years of career experience. Would you rather have a person on your data team with 2 years of experience at 5 different companies or 10 years of experience at one company?
definitely 10 years at one company, 2 years with 5 companies. That person's either contractor, which is then it's probably okay, or if that person is just jumping jobs, not being there long enough, I would probably be a little bit concerned.
Love it.
All right. Second question: is a college bachelor's degree overkill for working in data?
I already answered that, but no, not to me. I think college bachelor's degree tells me a lot about you as a person.
All right. You took a shot at influencers. Is there a way to be an influencer while also representing your experience properly, humbly?
Well, it depends on your definition of an influencer.
Okay, define it. Let's go ahead and define it.
I feel like anybody who posts anything anywhere is an influencer now. I think I have to me, you are, I respect you and I love to read your stuff when you have content that's useful, not just random, hand wavy stuff. And when, the more I learn about the subject and I see that, yeah, you truly know what you're talking about. I have a very like high pedestal for people that I kind of like follow and listen to. But in general, I also love reading random crazy stuff. So
Because
Stuff too.
I had lunch with a friend today, and then we had a little
Mhm.
kind of mind melding, and I posted a video on LinkedIn. So now I'm like, I wonder what are you going to call me out on something? We'll see. We'll talk about that later.
I hate influencer. Like it just to me it's just such a like a, oh, I'm posting on social media, I'm an influencer. I don't, it doesn't speak about experience. People who like talk about stuff that's important that I'm learning from, that give me interesting ideas, that like those are the people that I follow.
All right, Tim, take us away with the final question.
My final lightning round question here. Actually, I'm going to break the yes/no mold, and I'm going to say, what is the most under the radar skill in data?
Um, under the radar. Explaining hard subjects in a way that I would say a normal person can understand, because I think of us as aliens a little bit, but trying to distill complex problems in a way that, your grandma can understand, right? So I think that's such an underrated skill, and we don't help people get better at it. We're like, again, super sharp, very smart, but we can only talk to people that are like us. We have a hard time talking to people who aren't like us.
Yeah. Don't just speak alien language. You have to speak
I
human language too.
was like, well, sometimes like I talk and people like look at me like, no idea.
Love it. This is great.
All right, Tim, let's takeaway time. Take us
Let's
away.
take it away, and then y'all can have your delicious dinner. All right, so much good content today. Thank you so much, Veronika, for joining us today. So we really started off by saying that there's so much online that you can learn, that you can absorb. The information is at people's fingertips. Young people, the new generation, and we tried to define that later. They have all this access to all this stuff. It's so exciting, but at the same time, also it creates an environment where it can be hard to know what to trust. There's so much out there. There's so many people out there saying so many things. And you talked about your perspective to really have a good understanding of what is true, what is right, build your perspective. And that was a position of skepticism, right? Kind of taking a scientist's approach to looking at the knowledge that's out there, the people that are out there. Keep researching. Don't just over-index on the influencer. Some suggestions may be right, but some are not right. And some of them are even impossible. And you need to look past just kind of what the words are that are out there, just the things that get the most likes, and really think about contextually, what is the right information to solve the right problem. And really, you were encouraging that folks who are newcomers that are trying to learn, share your thoughts, be comfortable, but also this importance of engaging in debate and being skeptical and letting that kind of be out there. You mentioned a couple of things that are overhyped or, don't have enough skepticism around them. And one of them was the tool that will solve all your problems. I loved your example where you said, well, if let's say you have to get around, you need to get around. Oh, well, a car, give that person a car. But what if the person you were talking about was a child? Are you going to give the child the car? No, it doesn't fit. It doesn't make sense, right? But you said give them a car. That's the solution that solves everything. Oh, well, maybe it doesn't. Maybe that tool doesn't solve everything. The second thing you mentioned was the idea that data modeling is dead. It's not dead. Maybe it's hard, but DBT, for example, is modeling. And the third one was around AI and the idea that it's some kind of magic bullet. And we know that that's going to accelerate now with, all the excitement around GPT and things like that. There's a lot of good that can come from that, but also a lot of misunderstanding, certainly, that will be perpetuated. There's a competition that happens in the social sphere. And so you have to understand people's motivation. What are their biases? This is where psychology comes in. And even as vendors, right? So, Juan and I, we work over at Data.World. We have to be aware of our vendor biases as well. Juan, what about you?
Well, a couple of things, but I do want to look at our notes. I think you said DBT is not
a model.
I want to clarify that.
And
not modeling. Okay.
DBT is not model. DBT is really transformation, right?
Yeah, no, that's for no.
But Juan, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you. Tim, so who needs Chat GPT when you have Tim to summarize? Can I, borrow you and use you to summarize my thoughts?
We are working on Juan and Timbot coming soon to a chat plugin near you.
The Tim Juan bot. So keep going, because we talk about experience. Like, what do we mean by experience? So, hey, I've implemented 50 customers is one thing versus I've supported the 50 customers that you've implemented, right? So we really need to know where people are coming from, and that's how we can be humble around that, right? Experience is really contextual, and I really love your story about how you started out saying, hey, I work in SQL Server, and I can really optimize, make these super fast queries, but we don't need to go to the cloud. But then you actually realize and learn, it's like, oh, wait, this is actually valuable. And actually, the way the vendors plan is the wrong way. We actually came up with a better way, right? This is the context that we have. be skeptical with honest, no BS. Be skeptical about those big tech fan company experiences because they have a Lamborghini truck that you can stick in your garage and take pictures with. Because guess what? Is that what you really need? Probably not. Quick turnaround into the streaming, right? Is streaming versus no streaming. Like the thirst for quick data, fast data, it's coming. People really want real time analytics. They want it embedded into real time applications. However, not everybody needs it right now, but it's coming. Um, I really like the mix of the teams. You were, I mean, even in the lightning round question, you said that you prefer that the team mix that you meant that you would like that you want people who actually know about the operations, who know how to go build a tool and how to maintain that. And sadly, honest, no BS here, if you come from the big tech, you know how to use a tool that was created to go solve a big problem, but you actually didn't build it because the person who built it is probably not there anymore. We spent a lot of time talking about education. And again, very honest, no BS precision right now. Bachelor's, yes, that's needed. Doesn't really matter in what. Again, you can put a boot camp on top of that. And I think with people who argue that a four-year education is hard to get, like your position is like, no, actually, it's not hard. I mean, you have to go work for it, but it's actually not hard, and it's actually completely worth it. Because why? If you got 2 resumes, you got a pile of 200 resumes, guess who's going to stand out? If you just have a boot camp, you're not going to stand out. I'm sorry, but that's the honest no BS right there. Advice, like as Tim posed the question, is you're hungry, you like this data thing, you're in here for 2 years, like what should you go do? Yeah, get into the forums, get into the user groups, online communities, go read all the comments, see the ones you agree with and also the ones you don't agree with, right? You talked about the Snowflake user vault. You're a big data vault practitioner, and there's data vault user communities, so many Slack communities, right? Even though it's fine, just go lurk, consume. And actually, my side comment is like a lot of the conversations happen on privately on the DMs, right? I love your analogy on the 5-star ratings, right? Do you read I said I read the 5-star and the 1-star, and you was like, no, you should be reading the 2 and the 3, 4-star, right? That's where the nuances are. Find those patterns right there. And then what do we define as the young generation? Right? It's you've only interacted with the modern data stack, and then per our little history kind of we're going through, it's like that means that you've been around for the last kind of 6 years since 2017, 2018. If you've used Hadoop, Big Data, NoSQL, Cloudera, you're not young anymore over there. And I think there's a lot of awesome quotes that we put on T-shirts. One of my favorite ones is, "I want to be Bill Inman when I grow up." I think one.
Yes.
I think the overall takeaway, the takeaway of takeaways here is be humble, learn, ask questions, be skeptical.
Great summary. So
how did we do? What did we miss?
Amazing. I won the Team 1 bot.
All right. Back to you. 3 final questions. What's your advice about data, life? Second, who should we invite next? And third, what are the resources you followed? Even you've already said many, but
yeah. So data, don't go into data just for the money. It's a tough field. You always have to learn. Make sure you actually like it. If you like it, you'll have a very long and fulfilling career. So I talk about a lot. People like, oh, it's money. Don't just go into it for money. It's not easy. Don't think it's easy. What was the second question?
Who should we invite next?
Oh, so I was listening to a podcast with Brene Brown. She had Sidal Neely on it, and they were talking about digital mindset. So I am a huge fan right now of Sidal Neely. She's a professor at Harvard Business School. Incredible smart woman. If you can get her, I'd be like listening to it somewhere, cooking or something. So there's a lot of things that she said that we can totally resonate and connect with. And follow me on LinkedIn. I don't just like everything. I curate what I share. Again, my perspective, my bias, but at least like I kind of try not to be just on the hype of liking everybody. I'm sorry, friends. I kind of.
And you're also a big Snowflake.
I am a Snowflake data superhero for real. It's a true thing. I have a cape to prove it. So if you have any Snowflake questions, data modeling is a big thing. I think it's very important. So yeah, follow me on LinkedIn. I blog sometimes, but yeah.
All right. Veronika, thank you so much. Just quick, next week we have Tony Seal, who's a knowledge graph engineer. We'll be talking about knowledge graphs and large language models. I mean, we have to go get into the AI topic, but this is a really fascinating topic that I'm really excited about. And with that, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me in real life.
Yes, in real life.